All right,
All
and
right.
welcome. It's good to see you all here. Happy end of winter. I'm Paul Skowinski. I'm the statewide educator for the Citizen Lake Monitoring Network. I'm part of the Extension Lakes team at UW Stevens Point. I've got two others with me today. I'm going to let Paul and Chasten introduce themselves here in a second. We also have a bunch of our support staff from around the state on the call too. So I'll have them introduce themselves after Paul and Chasten. Maybe I'll just call them out in alphabetical order, but go ahead, Paul and Chasten, and I'll have you guys introduce yourselves first.
Go ahead, Chaston.
Yeah, and hey everyone, I'm Chasten Harlow. I'm the regional CLMN coordinator for the North Central 10 counties. I can see if I can rattle them off real quick. It's Ashland, Iron, Price, Taylor, Vilas, Oneida, Lincoln, Langlade, Forest, and Florence. I think that's 10. I've been in this position for about a little over a year now officially on my own, and I'm looking forward to open water season 2.
And hello, everybody. I am Paul Zdroik. I work here at UWSP, sharing a wall with Paul Skowinski with Extension Lakes. My official title is User Support Specialist, so I primarily focus on helping folks get their data into swims and navigating the technology that is out there.
Perfect. And then we have some of our regional coordinators on the call too. Alex, I guess you're first alphabetically. Could you unmute and introduce yourself from Menominee County?
Yep, I'm Alex Forster. I'm Menominee County AIS coordinator. I also work in the Land Conservation, Forestry, and Zoning Department.
Thanks, Alex. Ben, how about you?
I'm Ben Ewald. I'm with the Wisconsin DNR, and I cover 14 counties in the West Central region, from Polk County down to Crawford County, east to Marathon County, roughly.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. Bree? Oh, Bree sent a message instead of using her microphone. She's at Beaver Creek Reserve, and she covers Eau Claire, Chippewa, Rusk, Dunn, Pepin, and Buffalo counties. Who else? Chris Kolazinski, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Chris Kolosinski, Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. I cover Green Lake, Marquette, Fond du Lac over to Sheboygan, and then up to the north on the east side of Lake Winnebago and Oconto counties for CLMN.
Thanks, Chris. Derek Thorne.
Hi everyone, I'm Derek Thorne. I am the Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator for Forest, Langlade, Marinette, and Oconto County, covering primarily in Marinette for CLMN, and then I also help Chasten with some stuff on the Forest and Langlade end as well.
Perfect. Emily in Oconto County.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Schwartz, the AIS coordinator for Oconto County, working with Chris.
Awesome. Who else do we have? Madeline is on the call. Madeline, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Madeline McGee. I'm the monitoring technical lead here at Wisconsin DNR, and I'm located in the Madison office.
Thanks, Madeline. Is there anyone else I forgot on the list? Regional coordinators or support staff? I think that was everybody. Okay. All right. So this meeting is recorded. So if you want to watch part of this again or share it with someone else from your lake group or another volunteer, you're welcome to do that. It'll be posted to our Extension Lakes YouTube channel within the next couple of days. And these refresher trainings are required every 3 years for CLMN volunteers. They're intended to ensure consistency among our volunteers and answer questions that you may have for us. And they're providing important updates for procedures or any other program changes that may be happening for the upcoming season. So that's what I'll be starting with first here. I did want to mention that we do offer a refresher training at the Wisconsin Lakes and Rivers Convention. That's April 15th through 17th this year at the Stevens Point Holiday Inn. If you are interested in attending, if you're already coming to the conference, you can register for this workshop on Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday the 15th. There's no charge for the workshop. You can also attend just for the workshop and not the conference itself. If you want to just come for the workshop, there's no cost to do that either. But you do have to register by April 5th if you're attending in person. The refresher training at the convention is not streamed virtually or recorded, so there is not a virtual option. But if you'd like to come on see us in person, you can do that by registering by April 5th. There's also a lot of refresher trainings that happen regionally. So the people that you just heard introduce themselves organize their own in-person refresher trainings around the state. So there's lots of different options to attend a refresher training. This is our first virtual one. So I'm curious to hear feedback from you all, how this went. We thought it would be nice to offer something that people could attend from anywhere.
And oh, sorry about that.
I'm back. Hold on a second. Darn thunderstorms are messing with me here, I think. All right. Well, I was just saying that there are different refresher trainings held around the state, so there are many options that are organized by the regional staff. So you can find many different options for attending a refresher training. So as far as updates for 2026, the biggest thing that we are seeing this year is a switch to using UPS instead of USPS, not the US mail service. We're using UPS now. So I'll get into the reasons for that here in a second, but the big change will just be that you'll be provided with a prepaid UPS ground shipping label instead of a US mail shipping label. And the shipping container will be the same box you've always used. It will go to the state lab. It will come back from the state lab right to you. The same box will be used, but instead of delivering or dropping off your package to the post office, you'll need to go to a UPS shipping location. So that may be a UPS store or a UPS shipping hub in your area if you have one. Otherwise, there's a lot of businesses that partner with UPS so that somebody can walk in and just drop off a prepaid package at the store, and they will hold that because they get regular deliveries from UPS. So when the person comes in, they will pick up any packages that are waiting at the store. So Digicopy and Walgreens and Ace Hardware and lots of banks in areas around the state, CVS, Michaels, other stores are these partners. So you can go to one of those stores. In the case of Digicopy right here in Stevens Point, you walk in the front door, there's a rack right inside the door. You just say to the cashier, I've got a prepaid package. She'll say, put it on the rack, and then you leave. And when the UPS guy comes later that day, they pick up all the packages that are waiting on the rack and take them away for shipping. There's a feature on the UPS website that I've sent out in a few emails to volunteers that is a search tool. So you can look in your area of the state and get a list of all the shipping business partners where you can drop off packages. So why are we making that switch? Well, the biggest reason is because many of our samples were arriving at the lab too warm. And if they arrive too warm, the data gets flagged in the database, which sort of implies that it's not good data. It's still accurate. We still consider it trustworthy data, but the protocol at the lab says that these samples must arrive cold, below 6 degrees Celsius. And so we don't want the data to be flagged. We want it to be as reliable as it possibly can. And in order to do that, in order for us to really uphold our end of the deal here, you're collecting those samples, you're putting the time and effort into collecting those. We should hold up our end and make sure that those samples are getting to the lab cold, and we are doing everything we can to keep the quality of that data. So in 2024, and 2025, we looked at the number of samples that were arriving warm. The first two sections on this slide are the Water Action Volunteers water samples. So these are stream monitoring samples. And then the CLMN sections there, that the last two are lake monitoring water quality samples. And you can see that a lot of samples were arriving too warm at the lab in 2024, and it got worse in 2025. It got worse not because of a change to the way that volunteers were collecting anything or shipping anything, but because USPS just got even slower with the deliveries. So what we decided to do was do an experiment on our own. Chasten led this out of Rhinelander. So we packed up samples, basically fake water samples, just a bottle of water and a chlorophyll filter. And we basically acted as if we were the volunteers sending these in to see how long they would stay cold and how long they would take to get to the lab. So we put a continuous reading thermistor inside of each of the phosphorus water samples, and we could track on an hourly basis what the temperature of that sample was as it was being taken to the lab. And we did different styles of sampling experiments here. We did some where they were chilled and frozen like they're supposed to be, chilling the phosphorus sample and freezing the chlorophyll sample. And then our old protocol from years ago was to put a half bag of ice cubes in the box. That used to work when it took a day or maybe two to get to the lab, but recently things have gotten much slower. And so then the last few years, the protocol has been to have a set of samples in the box, chill the phosphorus sample, freeze the chlorophyll sample, and then put two half bags of ice in the box. And that basically fills all the open space within the box with ice cubes. We did another one where we just had ambient temperature samples, so we did not chill or freeze the samples. And then we tried one where we put two sets of samples in the same box. And what we found was that this is the ambient samples here. If we did not pre-chill those samples, but put two half bags of ice in there, it would only stay below the 6 degrees Celsius threshold for about 44 hours, so less than 2 days to arrive at the lab. These ones here are showing um, using our current protocol and putting two sets of samples in the box. So if we had just our single set of samples, pre-chilling the phosphorus water sample, freezing the chlorophyll sample, and then putting two half bags of ice in the box, that's the darker line here. We had about 88 hours where it would stay cold. If we put two sets of samples in there, it was about 3 days even, 72 hours. So this told us that it has a major impact if we chill that sample first instead of putting a 75 or 80 degree water sample into the box with the ice. If we pre-chill that first, freeze the chlorophyll sample, put all that into the box with two bags of ice cubes, that made a big difference in keeping that sample cold for longer. The current protocol, which is the freezing the chlorophyll sample, chilling the phosphorus sample, putting two half bags of ice in the box, kept it below 6 degrees C for 88 hours, 3.5 days roughly. Two sets of samples reduced that time, but it's still about 3 days. And it told us that we have, for one set of samples, we have a maximum of 3.5 days where those samples have to get to the lab in order to be below the temperature threshold required. And in both of our tests, we did 4 packages twice. In both cases, the U.S. Postal Service failed to get all those samples to the lab in 3 days in either case. We had a couple that went out of state for some reason, took a vacation to another state for a few days, then finally came back and got to the lab in Madison. We had one that took 10 days to get to the lab. And so it made it clear to us that using the Postal Service again in 2026 just was not going to work if we wanted these samples to stay cold. So getting to this year. So many of you probably have not received your spring sampling supplies yet. If you're in the south, you probably have. If you're in the northern region, you'll be getting yours really soon. Um, the state lab and the Department of Administration have a contract with UPS. And there was some hassle in getting the negotiated rates with UPS published within their account. And in order to produce those prepaid labels, the account has to show the correct rates. Basically, UPS had rates that were twice what we agreed to. And if that was the case, then we would have to cut way back on the number of lakes we could support doing water chemistry samples. So we didn't want to do that. The state lab was able to negotiate that down and get them to agree on that previously agreed price, and then they could print the labels. So the labels were printed last week. They were sent up here on Friday. They were distributed to the northern region on Friday, the southern region also, and the other ones are in the mail right now. So the regional coordinators around the state either have the labels or will be getting them within the next couple of days, and then they will be sent out to the volunteers. Another big update is that the acid vials that you use to preserve your phosphorus sample will be coming inside the shipping boxes this year. So when you get that box back from the state lab, it'll have your phosphorus sample bottle, it'll have your new chlorophyll tube, some bags, and it will have a vial of acid that will be used for your next sample. So you'll be receiving your first acid vial in your spring sampling packets from the coordinators in the next couple of weeks. And then after that, whoops, you will receive a new vial as you get the box back. So you'll constantly be receiving one vial with your supplies for the next round of sampling. And the last update I have is the cubitainers. If anybody has done quality assurance sampling, this is something that is requested from about 10% of water chemistry volunteers. We do this every year. We randomly select 10% of our chemistry volunteers to do this extra sampling that helps prove the data quality of our water chemistry sampling. And one of the things that we provide is a cubitainer, which is just a cube-shaped jug full of deionized water that is phosphorus-free water. And we used to provide it in a 1-gallon square jug, which was kind of difficult to use for this process because you have to hold your sampler in one hand and hold this jug of water in the other and dump the water into the sampler. And that's pretty difficult when you have an 8-pound jug of water in your hand. So we are now providing a 1-quart size instead of the 1-gallon. That's only 2 pounds of water instead of 8. And so it's a lot easier to manipulate in your hand. We will provide 3 of the quart size ones. I realize that 1 gallon and 3 quarts are not the same, but you only need 3 quarts to do the sampling and then have a little bit of extra. So it'll save a little bit of waste as well. And you will have 1 quart that's used to rinse the sampler, 1 that's used to take the actual blank sample, and then 1 that's extra water in case you need it. If you're not familiar with the quality assurance sampling, again, it's not required of everybody. It's something that we ask 10% of water chemistry volunteers to do each year. We do have a video that shows this process on our playlist, on the YouTube playlist for all the CLMN videos. And if you're curious on what that looks like, or you're selected this year and you would like to see how that's done, then you can watch that video. All right, now I'm going to switch this over to Paul Z to talk about the SWIMS database and the Water Explorer.
All right, hopefully everybody can hear me. Once again, my name is Paul Zdroik. I know quite a few people joined a little later. So Paul Zdroik, Extension Lakes user support specialist. And yeah, I'll be walking you through kind of how to access the SWIMS database and input data along with, hopefully you can all see my screen, along with how to use the data, how to see reports through our Water Explorer from the DNR. So first things first, one of the things I'd like y'all to do is have, I think, Chaston, if you could text the URL I'd like everyone to have. But if you have any issues or questions with logging into SWIMS or navigating it, you can email us at lakesupport@uwsp.edu. And I think Chaston said he was going to put that in the
Yep,
chat.
I just put it in the chat.
Okay, good. When I shared my screen, it removed the whole chat thing for me, so I can't even see it anymore. So thanks for doing that. So, and then the other, does somebody have a question? Thought I heard something. That's okay. All right. So the other thing is also if you could bookmark this URL here, it's the Extension Lakes homepage, which is based out of UWSP. This is kind of a great landing place to start all things. So yeah, feel free to just copy that URL. I think Chaston posted that in the chat as well. And that'll be this is just going to be a really great website to kind of have as reference. So first thing you do when we go here, when you're getting into entering your data into SWIMS, is you're going to want to go to the Citizen Lake Monitoring Network tab here, and that tab is going to bring you to this page. And from here, you're going to hit the data entry button. And this could also be your data entry button this could also be a URL you could save if you just want to go straight to the CLMN Citizen Lake Monitoring Network items. But yeah, from here on the first chunk up here, first section kind of goes over the state of Wisconsin's My Wisconsin ID. For those of you that haven't set this up yet, this is going to be the first section you're going to go to, and this is basically what the state of Wisconsin has transitioned over to from our earlier used to be the WAMS access, but they moved over to the My Wisconsin ID. And the best way I can explain what that is it's essentially like an office building that the state of Wisconsin owns, and in the office building is the SWIMS database. It takes up one room. So the My Wisconsin ID can get you into this building, and it can get you into the SWIMS database. It can also get you into a whole bunch of other things that the state of Wisconsin has under their control, whether it's forestry, fishery, wildlife management. All of them kind of use this My Wisconsin ID to kind of get into these areas. But for this intent and purposes, the My Wisconsin ID, once you register for that and let us know, we can get you access into the SWIMS database. And I can kind of showcase a little bit of what that looks like, but really the best thing that I have sent all of our volunteers is this video right here. And Paul Skowinski made this about a year ago, and this video is just fantastic in explaining everything that goes into creating the My Wisconsin ID and linking it to your SWIMS database, your SWIMS profile account. I think it's like less than 5 minutes long. So if you pause and resume it, at most it'll take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. And if you still have issues with that, feel free to reach out to that email address. Is there a question? Okay, let me keep going. All right. So that's the My Wisconsin ID, and I'll showcase a little bit how on what that looks like when I enter it here as well. So once you're on here, and if you have your My Wisconsin ID, you really want to get into the SWIMS database. So you're just going to click the SWIMS database to go here, and that'll bring you to this is the splash page that the SWIMS database is on, and you're going to want to click the sign in button underneath the My Wisconsin ID modal here. When we click that, it should bring us in. This is my other one, but I'm going to be using this guy. So you're going to enter the email address that you have associated with your My Wisconsin ID. When you click that, you'll be entering your password as well. And I know my password is going to be saved there. And then at this point, it's going to ask for an SMS message to be sent to you an email. For anyone that's confused what SMS means, that's just a short message service is what that stands for, which is a text message. So it'll go to your text message on your phone. iPhone and Android users all have text messages. They all support SMS. So this is kind of the preferred method we encourage everyone to use. So I'm going to click the blue button that says, yep, send me that verification code. And then if I check my phone, I'll get a text message showing up from My Wisconsin ID verification. And my code is 825-509. Oh, of course. No. Oh, I don't know why that did that. Oh, okay, there we go. That was interesting. I've never seen that happen before. But luckily, just refreshing it seemed to get me in there. All right. So from here, when you want to enter your data for water clarity or any other data entry, really what we push people to go to is the submit data button up here at the top on the blue header. You click the submit data button, and then underneath you can have submit data as well. So you'll click that as well. And then from here, Generally just say the start time. If you know the start time that you did it, please try to have that in there. A lot of folks like to go like a little after work, I've noticed, like 3 p.m., 4 p.m. So having that in there, and it usually takes about an hour to do. So make sure you're setting your end time in the same manner. Do that. So we got 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. on lake monitoring. The form should auto load as well. If it doesn't, reach out to us and we can help walk you through it. In the videos that we shared with this CLMN refresher, there is a section that kind of showcases how to find the forms. So you could reference one of those videos on how to find a form as well if you choose to do so. After that, then you'd hit the next button up top here. And then this is the screen where you will be entering all of your information, all of the information for that sample collection. So I'll be entering some items here, and this is all for an example. I'll make sure I go back through and remove all this. So yep, we're gonna do 19 feet. It did not hit the bottom. We had normal vision. The water level staff gauge, if you have a water level or a staff gauge with you and it's been you can use it. This is kind of where you do it. Otherwise, leave it alone. If you enter anything in here, it's going to assume that, yes, you do have a staff gauge and it'll enter it as like a 0. So just leave it alone. Don't put any data in there if you do not have that. Column appearance, that's usually clear. And color, we'll say green. And then beautiful. And this is generally, if you have DOs and stuff like that, then you would hit save and enter temp. If you hit the save button, that'll just save it here and you can stay here if you needed to update things up as well. Save and return, this button will take you back to all of the data you have entered. And if you wanted to showcase that, but we are going to just enter a little bit of dissolved oxygen. So this is the screen we're just entering the dissolved oxygen. First things we kind of encourage people to do is to set your depths and your units on all these things first. You have all those up here, and then you can enter your dissolved oxygen feet. We'll go through that. And then the degrees usually about that goes down by 2 most generally. And this is all just an example, just so everyone knows, nothing here. Don't take this all. Do not enter the same thing I'm doing.
Pretty warm water temperature for March.
Yep, yeah. Yeah, very hot, very hot. Ice came off very quickly. So after this, if you have more, if you're going plenty of feet down, you can add the little blue button here can add more rows. You can go as many as you want. But really most folks just use the first 10 that come up. After that, we're going to hit the save and return button. And this will bring us out to all the data you have entered. Because this is a user that's an example user. I don't have anything else aside from this fieldwork event that I put in here. And I use the word fieldwork event and data entry interchangeably, but they're all kind of the same thing. Fieldwork event is what the DNR IT folk and a lot of us who work behind the scenes, we kind of call this. It's called the field work. A lot of CLMN volunteers and other volunteers would call this just the data they entered. But really, this showcases everything. This screen will showcase every data entry you have made into SWIMS. You have the option to delete. You have the option to kind of buzz in here and take a look at it. If you made a mistake in your fieldwork event when you created this, if you're like, oh shoot, it wasn't clear, it wasn't clear. We recommend deleting and then redoing the fieldwork and redoing the data entry. So for instance, if you wanted to check your data that you just put in, you would select the fieldwork sequence number. It has like a little hyperlink viewing to it. Select that, and then when you get into this screen, you can go down to field results. There's a tab near the mid parts of the section under results. Go to field results because this is you were out in the field, and then you can kind of see this is what I entered just moments ago. And if you notice, like, oh, this was actually blue, not green, then you'd have to go back and delete this fieldwork event. You delete it here, and then you would re-enter it. I'll do that now. I'm going to delete it just so it's not in the Swims database, but this is kind of how you'd go about doing that if you needed to delete it. So it's no longer a part of that project anymore. I'm going to take a quick pause here. Does anybody have any questions that I wasn't able to see at all prior to me moving on?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay. All right. That's fine. All right. So now then usually the next big question after you enter the data, you deleted the data, you re-entered the data because you made a mistake on the first data. The next big question is, how do I see this? How do I, print off a report, things like that? So that's what I'm going to be showcasing next. So we're going to go back to the home page of Extension Lakes. We're going to go to Citizens Lake Monitoring Network. We're going to go to data entry again. Should all look pretty familiar. We showcased the My Wisconsin ID and the sign-in process. We showcased a little bit of entering data into SWIMS, and now we're going to go to the viewing, monitoring data, and accessing data reports. Once again, there's a really great video that Paul Skowinski made that kind of goes over how to use the Water Explorer tool or WEX. Then there's also a PDF for those of you who might be like me. I like having the page next to me as I'm kind of going through and just doing my own other thing. Both of these are great resources to use when it comes to viewing the data from SWIMS. But we're going to jump right into it. So the first thing you're going to do is go to the DNR Lakes page. And this is what I'm doing right now is navigating to the Water Explorer tool that is out there. And this Water Explorer tool is a really powerful and robust tool that kind of showcases a lot of the data that's in SWIMS in relatively easy to understand. So we're going to click here, and this takes us to the DNR, Wisconsin DNR Lakes page. What you want to do is find a lake. You're going to click this Find a Lake modal here. That's going to bring us up into the lakes pages of the DNR. Now, I know my example will be using Lake Alva for my example. So 1 second as I grab that. Okay, this is not the right lake. There we go. So we have, if you type in Alva, it brings up two of them, and I know the one I want to use is on Oneida, in Oneida County. So right off the bat, when you find the lake, they're like, this is my lake. There is a lot in this DNR Lakes page that has a lot of different tools. One of my favorite ones I like to point people out to is this interactive map. It's on a surface water data viewer. It's just a really, really great place to go to if you want to get into some more of the nitty-gritty details and information regarding the lake, along with a few other items that may not be available in the Water Explorer tool. So just something to keep an eye on if you're ever bored and want to learn more about your lake or the watershed. This is just a great landing page for all of that. But for today's lesson here, what we're going to be focusing on is the Water Explorer tool. And to get to that within any of your lakes, you're going to go to the More tab within the Lakes page here. And then on here, you're going to see a whole bunch of hyperlinks, but the one we are focusing on is the Water Quality Reports and Data page. So we're going to click this, and this is going to start taking us to being able to find the Water Explorer link here. So in the Water Quality Reports and Graphs, on the right side, you're going to see a little reports with details. We're going to select that Details button. And then we're going to open the Water Explorer tool. Click this blue button as well. Now, the Water Explorer tool utilizes, I think it's like 7 or 8 different web services. So there's a lot of work that's going into this initial page that shows up from the Water Explorer tool. So one of the things I do if I'm working on this and I'm looking at a lake is I will click the button, then I'll go get myself a cup of coffee, maybe look outside at a bird or two, and give this thing about 2 minutes to spin up because there's a lot of work being pulled from the SWIMS database to build this whole page out. So just be patient with it. And I see I got disconnected from here, so hopefully it will spin up. Yeah, so in the bottom right corner, you can kind of see there's little indicators saying it's kind of building the page and all that. But what we're really looking for here is after about 30 to 40 seconds, this water body should start. You should start seeing a map show up, and then a few other areas of information populating. I'm just going to give it a brief minute here. Oh, here it goes. Thinking about it. As that's loading, just going to double check. So Joe's asking how do we access the recordings after today. I believe Paul Skwinsky will be sharing that or sharing some of it to everybody. All right, so that, like I said, that takes us anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes to kind of load. So just be patient with that. And the first page that it takes you to is kind of the overview tab. There's quite a few other things you can look at here. If there's multiple, if this lake has multiple stations on it that have information, but usually more often than not, once you load into it, it's going to take you directly to the overview page. This page showcases all the data that is in swims related to this station, and so it'll be able to, in descending order, you'll be able to see the most recent one going all the way down. If you wanted to download just like the data from swims, and you want to have your own Excel, that's where you'd be using these buttons here. Otherwise, what most everybody really likes is the CLMN report generator. That's this button right here. And I should note before doing that, you have options to have any year that, as long as these years are present in the SWIMS database with this lake, the years should auto-populate. So if you only did it from 2019 to 2025, it'll show 2019 to 2025. But this lake has lots and lots of historical data on that. So we're going to be going with 2025. And then you click the button, download CLMN report. It's building the CLMN report, and it is usually takes anywhere from 20 to 30 seconds for this to go to. But essentially what it's doing is putting this all into a PDF format that you can easily print, or you can send in email attachments with relative ease. And it kind of contains everything that's already on this page, just in a PDF report for actual physical handling, or more easily to transfer to folks over an email. So hopefully that'll finish up soon. I have a feeling a lot of you are on the WEX Explorer right now and pounding away on the keyboard. So things are a little slower with the WEX tool right now, but that's okay. We'll just give it a couple minutes. Yes, the Water Explorer is available to anyone to view. It is a public tool, and we're hoping with more usage going on it, it'll become more and more prominent. So good question, Dale. Thank you. Hopefully I have no, I don't have one in here stowed away. It is still building it, as I can see right here. It's still building that report. So I have a feeling the DNR servers are just a little overburdened right now with all the requests coming in from it. But eventually, when this thing is done building, there will be a PDF that should appear, and usually in your downloads file, downloads tab. For me, I'm using Microsoft Edge. There's a little notification that appears up here that says, Elva Lake CLMN report, and it gives kind of a date dependent with it as well. And that should showcase up here as well. In the meantime, yeah, that's kind of how you would view the data. This is like I said, the CLMN report should populate here in a minute or so. In the meantime, feel free we can look at like all the Secchi depths, the total phosphorus, the chlorophyll. There's just, like I said, lots of information to showcase through this tool set. there any other questions? Okay, nothing related to this, but I apologize. I was really thinking that this would CLMN report PDF would showcase here, but I'm guessing it'll probably be a few more minutes. With that, that kind of wraps up how to access swims, enter data, and see the data. Do we have any questions that I can answer right now regarding this? Um, we'll be holding questions at the end of all this as well. So if you have something that you think of during it, just hang on to it till we get to the end. Um, otherwise, I think that kind of wraps it up for me. And I think we'll be handing it over to Paul or Chasten next.
Chasten's up next, but I'll just say
Okay.
that Alva Lake has a lot of data, which is why it's taking a while here. Generally, at least on my computer at home or at work, uh, building that CLMN report is usually maybe a 15 to 25-second process. So it usually doesn't take all that long. This is taking unusually long to
Right.
build.
So I'll I could once it shows up here, maybe near the end, once I get it generated, we can circle back to me and I can just showcase what the PDF looks like once it's done. But yeah, I have a feeling there's just a lot of users using this right now, and it's just a little overwhelming for it. So that's okay. We can circle back to it. All right. I think we'll hand it over to Chasten next for water clarity and water chemistry monitoring procedures. Go ahead, Chasten.
Perfect. I'll get my screen shared here real quick. Okay. We'll start from the beginning. Yeah, thanks, Paul. So like you mentioned, we're going to be switching over to more of the protocols side of things. I'm going to be covering SECI, water chemistry, and QA/QC, just kind of to start out. What is a SECI disk? I'm pretty sure most of y'all should be familiar with what one looks like, but it's an 8-inch diameter plastic tool that we use to measure water clarity. One's pictured here on the screen. A fun fact for y'all historians out there, this was created by a priest at the request of the head of the Papal States Navy in the mid 1860s. And a lot of y'all might be wondering, man, I thought Italy's a lot older than that. Like, what are the Papal States? Well, it was kind of the Vatican's country, we can call it, for hundreds of years. And it was actually annexed in 1870 and when Italy became unified. So just a little history lesson. Another fun fact is it's used a lot for templates for limnological logos. And as you can see, even our Citizen Lake Monitoring Network has a SECI at the center. It's one of the oldest water quality monitoring tools. I like to discuss why we use this data and why it's helpful. One of the things is it's very cheap compared to other tools out there, such as SONS, which can be used to measure water temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, or a spectrophotometer, which is required for chlorophyll or phosphorus samples. But what does this data actually tell us? So a SECI disk, like I mentioned, is really used to just measure the transparency of the water, how clear it is, how many organic or inorganic materials might be floating in the water column. So this figure here shows you, if it's a clear water column, typically you'll be able to see a SECI disk deeper into the water, whereas it can get clouded with things such as algae, suspended sediment, or like water staining as well, from tannins, or being next to bogs and having kind of that tea, like that bog tea, seep into the lake and staining it brown. And some people might be wondering, what does this tell you about your lake? I like to explain that water clarity doesn't always necessarily mean or indicate the health of a lake. Some lakes are naturally stained. Some of them up here, some lakes up here in the northern region are completely undeveloped, but because of their proximity to wetlands or the the tannin runoff from the surrounding watershed. It just naturally has a darker water color, which would therefore result in a shallower Secchi reading. So it's not always used to tell exactly how healthy your lake is, but one of the best tools, the best ways it can be used is by tracking this trend over time. So say you have a lake such as Crystal Lake or Trout Lake, or I'm going to be referencing a lot of northern county lakes because those are the ones I'm familiar with. But, say they have 20, 25 foot Secchi readings, and over 20 years, you're seeing that you see that start to decline slowly. That can be indicative of changing conditions on the water, in the watershed, or the water quality of your lake in general. So those are generally what we use Secchi for. There are a lot of things that can influence water clarity, like I mentioned. Sediment, and that could also be natural from streams or rivers flowing into lakes, or it could be unnatural from construction sites along with the riparian area, or agriculture runoff, which can increase phosphorus, which increases nutrients for chlorophyll, which will cause your water column to get even more clouded. So it's a very basic and simple tool that can be used to help indicate a lot of other factors about your lake. So hopefully most of y'all watched the training videos before, because we're not really going to go through the protocols like step by step, or if we do, it's going to be a pretty quick version. I mainly want to focus on like some tips and tricks to keep in mind while you're doing these protocols. So another thing that the Secchi disc will be used for is to measure the trophic state index. And a lot of people look at this graph and think, the oligotrophic is, as you can see here, 50-foot Secchi depth reading, very clear water, and automatically assume that's a very healthy lake, and that could be the case. And if you're on the other end of the spectrum in a eutrophic lake, a lot of people assume that it's an unhealthy lake. But like I mentioned, there are natural variables that can cause a lake to be eutrophic, and the natural life cycle of a lake is to move towards eutrophication in general. So this is just a helpful chart to kind of see how your average Secchi depth, where that would line up in the trophic state index, which is just a measure of the lake's total productivity. So what you'll need to go out to do Secchi monitoring, you're going to need a Secchi disc with 2 clothespins, a lake map with a station marked, life jackets, anchor and rope, boat, a Secchi data sheet, and a pencil. Everything that's pictured on the dock here. A helpful thing to keep in mind for like a lake map with a station marked, I know sometimes I get questions about being able to find the station, how close do you need to be? Do you need to be right on top of it? I would say get as close as you can. And sometimes it can be hard to look at like a physical map and tell exactly where you are on a lake. So something I recommend to my volunteers is actually creating a pin on Google Maps or Apple Maps where the sampling location would be. And then your phone satellite should hopefully update your location to where you can get close enough to that pin, and you should be able to monitor from there. This is what the data sheet for Secchi looks like. There's more than just the Secchi depth. That's just one of these columns here. So you'll want to record your name, the date, time, rounded to the nearest hour, the Secchi depth, if it hits bottom, all these different things, as well as observations. I really like to highlight the observations because this can be used to kind of explain what the conditions are during the time of sampling, whether it's really cloudy for some reason, which maybe you should try to pick another day if possible, or if it's a lot of boat traffic, which could increase wave activity, which will result in a decreased Secchi depth, or just different things like that that can be used to kind of help explain the data that you record on the data sheet. So Secchi monitoring, you're going to grab all that equipment I mentioned earlier and head out onto the lake between preferably 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. This is just a way to kind of standardize the sampling period across the state. if you're going to be going out at 4:30, like, is that too big of a deal? No. Like, if that's the only time you can get out there, like Paul mentioned, after work or something, totally understandable. But we really try to highlight trying to go between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. You also want to remove your sunglasses whenever you get to the sampling location before taking your Secchi, and you'll be taking your Secchi depth reading on the shady side of the boat. Again, these are all just kind of quality control measures, a way to reduce confounding variables. You can imagine if you have your sunglasses, especially if they're polarized, you'll be able to see deeper into the water column, which will introduce a bias where your Secchi depth is reading deeper than it should be naturally. So you'll want to get out to the sample site, throw down your anchor, remove your sunglasses, and I would let the boat drift a little bit, because if there's some wind or some current, the shady side of the boat can change. So once you become relatively stable, you'll lean over to the shady side of the boat and you'll start dropping your Secchi disc into the water. Once the black and white disc disappear from view, you'll take one of the two clothespins and clip it to the rope at the water surface. It can be a little challenging for certain boats, such as like pontoons, or even leaning over the side of a canoe can be intimidating for some folks. So you can always try to gauge where it is roughly on the rope using the black or red markers on it and putting the clothespin there. But once the first clothespin is on, you'll further drop the Secchi disc until it completely disappears from view, like plus a couple of feet preferably, and start reeling it back in. And then once you can see the Secchi disc again, you'll take the second clothespin, put it onto the rope, and you'll bring it up to the boat and take your Secchi reading from there. You'll be rounding to the nearest quarter foot. And like I mentioned, there are marks on your rope. You might be able to see that in the photo here, but each black mark is 1 foot increment. And then a red mark usually indicates 5 foot markers. So once you do that, you'll record that on the data sheet under Secchi depth, like I mentioned. You'll also record if it hit the bottom. Most lakes it shouldn't, but some lakes it does. The lake level, typically I record that before going out onto the lake using some indicators around the shore, whether it's a specific rock or the dock, and just kind of seeing where the ordinary high water mark is on those and comparing what the current water levels are in relation to that. If you have a staff gauge, maybe you can be able to use that too, but you'd want to record lake level. Whenever you finish recording Secchi depth, you can then drop the Secchi disc back into the water about 1 foot, and this can be used to help record color and clarity. I think it might be called appearance on the data sheet. Let me look actually. Yeah, if the water column is clear or murky. So whenever you drop the Secchi disc into the water by about 1 foot, you can use the white spaces on the disc to discern whether it's red, yellow, brown, green, or blue. I'm pretty sure those are the 5 colors. If it's orange, you're going to have to pick yellow or red. And whenever I train volunteers, sometimes they'll ask me, what do you think? And then I'll provide some help, but I like to really emphasize that if you're going to be the one collecting this data consistently, recording what you believe it is, I think is most important to keep that consistency throughout the sampling period. If you were to hand a Secchi off to a second person to even just grab something like depth, you're probably going to get a slightly different result just based on, natural eyesight ability and things like that. So if you can't pick between one of the 5 colors, I'd pick the closest one. And then there was a question about checking the satellite schedule and knowing what those dates are. This is more of a bonus. If you have the ability to line up your monitoring with this overhead satellite schedule, that is helpful because that data is used to then reinforce the coding that's used for the remote sensing that's done within the satellite to use images of color and I'm not sure exactly what else is in there. It's kind of above my pay grade, if we're going to be honest, but they can use satellite imaging to estimate, I'm pretty sure, the trophic index of your lake based on water color and clarity. So to find that, we're going to exit out of this PowerPoint real quick.
I just shared the Citizen Lake Monitoring Network satellite schedule link in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
So if you're looking for the satellite schedule, just type in CLMN. You can do UWSP. I typically do the DNR because it's what I'm more familiar with. And I'm pretty sure the database to find your satellite path is also on the DNR's website. So if you click CLMN, the first result from CLMN WDNR, you'll get taken to the homepage on the DNR's website. Can you all see my screen? I just want to make sure that it's showing the.
Yeah, we see it.
Perfect. So once you get here, under spring materials, you'll go to your satellite path, and then you can search for your lake by county. So let's just do some random one in Pierce. If you're on Mud Lake in Pierce County, you can see over here in the last column that you'll be in path 26. And so what does this mean? If you go back to the home page for CLMN, the satellite schedule, you'll see path 26, and these are the dates that the satellite will be overhead your sampling location for the year. So if you have an interest in trying to match up your monitoring time frame with these dates, that's helpful, but it's definitely not required. And like I mentioned, just dropping the Secchi disc about a foot into the water can be really helpful for water clarity and appearance. And then finally, the last thing you're going to want to record is the user perception. This is very subjective. It's a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being beautiful, could not be nicer. And I forget the exact wording for 5, but I like to think of it as I shouldn't be in the water, even on a boat, maybe, if it's that bad. But there on the data sheet, the scale is defined. I think 2 is like minor impairment or something like that. It's defined on the data sheet. Are there any questions about Secchi monitoring? And like Paul mentioned, there will be time at the end of the session to ask questions as well. Anything in the chat? Okay, not hearing anything. I'm going to keep moving forward. So next is going to be phosphorus and chlorophyll. Phosphorus is but is the limiting nutrient for aquatic plant growth in lakes. It's a very sticky element, and that's kind of important for when we discuss the actual protocol and trying not to contaminate your samples. It's found in a multitude of locations in human and animal waste, soil erosion, detergent, septic systems, lawns, and farm runoff. There is naturally occurring phosphorus in the sediment. Like I mentioned, it's sticky, so it'll stick to the muck or the rocks, and erosion over time will help release that phosphorus into the water column. So again, higher phosphorus levels doesn't always necessarily indicate a unhealthy lake. It's really, really specific. And then chlorophyll is a pigment found in cyanobacteria and chloroplasts of algae, and it uses and feeds off of phosphorus. So phosphorus readings will tell you how much phosphorus is in the lake, but then the chlorophyll will tell you how much of that phosphorus is potentially being used. If you have higher amounts of phosphorus, chances are you're going to have higher levels of chlorophyll, or resulting in things like algal blooms. It also needs sunlight, which is where the Secchi depth disc comes into sometimes. There's a lot more to phosphorus and chlorophyll. Madeline might be able to help fill in some gaps, or Paul if they want, but this is kind of why we collect this data. These 3 tools can be used in coordination to calculate your state's or your lake's trophic state index, which again is the overall productivity of your lake. So Um, yeah. The sampling timeline for chemistry is taken 4 times a year, and I forgot to mention this actually for SECI, but SECI is typically recorded once every 10 to 14 days. I've had people record dozens of times throughout a summer. Chemistry is just 4 times. So the first one will be coming up here soon. It's within 2 weeks after ice off, or you'll sometimes hear it referred to as the turnover sample. And this is only for total phosphorus, which is what TP stands for. And then you'll collect again in the last couple of weeks of June, July, or August. Sometimes I'll get questions about, how much time should be spread between these samples for June, July, August. I'd really recommend a couple weeks at least. So if you're going out, June 28th, I wouldn't recommend going out July 4th to collect your July sample. I'd try to push that back to the middle or end of July if possible. Again, life happens, situations are situational. So if there's things that come up where you're unable to take samples at the opportune time, I'd recommend collecting them when you can. And whenever the data is entered into SWIMS, the date that the sample was collected is recorded, so that can be used by resource managers to kind of maybe help tell the full story of what happened. So for chemistry monitoring, what you're going to need everything that was mentioned in the SECI monitoring part of this presentation. Typically, when you're doing chemistry, you're also going to be doing SECI. And actually, it's required to be able to tell how much water you need to filter for your chlorophyll samples, but getting a little ahead of myself. You're also going to need an integrated sampler or a Van Dorn if you're on a shallow lake. Quick question. You can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself to answer, but do we have any Van Dorn volunteers in this meeting right now? Because I definitely focus more on the integrated sampler, the 0 to 6 foot integrated sampler, but if there are Van Dorn monitors in the meeting, I'll also highlight some of the differences for that. Not hearing anything. Was there anything in the chat?
There's 2 thus far that say they use Van Dorn in the chat.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So Van Dorn is also just an integrated sampler. Integrated just means taking a certain depth of the water column and mixing that together. And so for shallow lakes, like I mentioned, you're going to be using this small Van Dorn. If you are a Van Dorn monitor, you probably know a lot more about it than I do, honestly, but it looks like this clear cylindrical thing on the dock in the photo to the right here. And the integrated sample is the white PVC tube that collects a sample from 0 to 6 feet. You're also going to need a 2-liter water collection bottle, a temperature meter, and a cooler or some way to keep the sample shaded. This is what the chemistry data sheet looks like. It's very similar to the SECI, as you can see up top here. It's the exact same as the SECI. The only difference is these bottom tables where you can record the water temperature and dissolved oxygen if your meter has that capacity at various depths throughout the water column. And here's actually that 1 to 5 scale for user perception that I mentioned earlier. So as you can see here, 1 is being beautiful, cannot be nicer, and 5 is substantially reduced because of algal levels. Like I mentioned, maybe reconsidering being even in the boat. So chemistry monitoring, it's hard to kind of go into depth virtually about what you need to do for monitoring. So I'm, again, hoping that a lot of y'all watch the videos beforehand. And if not, please check those out after this training to refamiliarize yourself with the protocol in more depth than I will be able to go into today. So you're going to start with the SECI reading, and that we've covered that already. The next step would be collecting your temperature measurements. If you're monitoring chemistry, we provide a temperature meter. It does not have a dissolved oxygen probe on it, so I won't be really covering that. But the temperature meter looks like the one pictured here. It's very simple. It's just a kind of like I forget what they're called, not a syringe, but a metal needle almost looking thing, really large gauge needle, granted. But um, it's pretty simple here, and it's weighted with a couple things to help keep the cord, the cable straight as you go through the water column. If we didn't add the weights, the light weight of the meter itself would likely float and kind of jump up and down between the water column, making your readings inaccurate. And there's not a depth finder on the temperature meters either. So the cable's marked every 3 feet for your convenience to help know where you are in the water column whenever you're recording on the data sheet. I like to say double check temperature units, although we provide temperature meters, and I'm pretty sure most, if not all of them, are in Fahrenheit. Some of y'all might have access to a YSI or a Hawk meter that records in Celsius. And so, as Paul Zadroik mentioned earlier, when recording or entering that data into SWIMS, you can change your units to Fahrenheit or Celsius, depending on the type of meter you have. Once you get past 45 feet, your measurements will be extended to every 5 feet. And if it's super deep, talk to your regional coordinator to discuss a sampling protocol that kind of makes sense for that lake. If, say you live on Trout Lake and you're monitoring temperature, I think it's 135-ish feet. I don't think we have meter cables that reach that deep. So measuring temperature on those lakes will look different than your typical lake, I guess. So this is the face of the temperature meter that we use. As you can see here, it just records Fahrenheit and temperature. Doesn't indicate anything about depth. So just making sure there's no kinks in your cable and making sure that as you're looking into the water column, it looks like it's going straight down is helpful. Once you collect the temperature data, you're going to start collecting your chemistry data. So you'll take your water collection bottle and your integrated sampler and rinse those 3 times with lake water. Sometimes I get the question, is it okay to dump the water at the same side of the boat as you're collecting your sample? Realistically, it probably doesn't change too much, but if you have the ability to dump your integrated sample in on one side of the boat and tip it over to spill it out the top on the other side of the boat, it's just a useful tool to me to make sure that I'm not collecting any sample that was used as rinsing water. And once you do the rinsing, you're going to take your integrated sampler and dunk it into the lake up to the black tape. You might be able to see in the photo here the black tape on the integrated sampler. You'll want to go until that reaches the water surface. I have another picture here of Paul Zadroik doing this using the rope, and I think that can be especially helpful for some of the larger boats or pontoons where maybe reaching down to the water level while holding the integrated sampler itself is not really feasible. But you'll want to get down to the black tape. And the reason that this is important is because, if you only go about halfway down, then the integrated sampler is no longer 0 to 6 feet, but it's 0 to 3 feet or something like that. In all the protocols for the integrated sampler, at least the 0 to 6 foot one is for that depth in the water column. And whenever you go down and up, you'll want to do it in one smooth motion, especially on your way up. If you drop the integrated sampler back into the water, the ball valve at the end of it could potentially open up. And again, the sample depth that you're collecting at then could be affected, I guess. For Van Dorens, it's even harder to try to explain online, but you would drop your Van Doren down to 3 feet. And again, if you use a Van Doren, you're probably a lot more familiar with this than I'm about to explain. But before you drop it down to 3 feet, you'd want to set the trap, I like to call it, where you take the wires from the end of the Van Doren, the balls, and attach them to the handle or the metal clip, whatever your Van Doren might look like. And You'll want to drop it into the lake with the integrated sampler being open or the Van Doren being open. And then you'll use a metal weight to throw down the length of the rope to hopefully hit a metal button, for lack of a better word, that will release the cables to snap the ball shut at the ends of the Van Doren and collect the sample from that specific depth and time.
And there's a really cool demonstration of that happening underwater in slow motion in the video that we have.
Yep, exactly. Whenever you do this, say you're using an integrated sampler, like I mentioned, there's a ball valve at the end of it that helps keep the water from spilling out the bottom as you pull it up back to the boat. Whenever you're ready to put it into your water collection bottle, which I would recommend having available before collecting the sample, because sometimes it might leak a little bit, you'll use the PVC bar or rod that's right inside the lip of the bottle to push the ball valve onto to release the water. You want to avoid touching the inside of the cap, the lid, the PVC rod, or the ball valve. Like I mentioned, phosphorus is very sticky, so we have phosphorus on our hands. So once you touch one of those items, you can potentially contaminate the sample. So this is just showing what that looks like whenever you push the integrated sampler down onto the PVC rod. You can see the water spilling out into the collection bottle here. Like I mentioned, never touch the valve with your fingers. I had a volunteer last year that admitted that that's how they were trained from, I think, a previous volunteer. Like they would use their finger to release the ball valve. And so I would, even if you have gloves on, do not do that. You have the PVC rod there to help. Once you collect the sample, you're going to place the water collection bottle into a cooler or a shaded part of the boat. It's important to keep it shaded because, as I mentioned, chlorophyll requires sunlight. And if there's sunlight hitting the sample, then it could skew your chlorophyll results being higher because they're using that sunlight to photosynthesize and keep reproducing. Once you do that, you're pretty much done collecting the sample on the lake. Once you get back to shore or back to your cabin or wherever you store your equipment, you'd want to rinse the integrated sampler with distilled water. Typically, the way I like to do this is tipping it over so the ball valve is pointing up and kind of maybe even tapping the top of it if the ball valve gets stuck, or using the PVC rod to unstick that stuck ball valve, and pouring the distilled water over the ball valve and letting it run through the integrated sampler out the top, rotating it as you do so that way all the inside of the integrated sampler gets covered with distilled water during rinsing. And like I mentioned, you'll want to store this with the ball valve sticking up. Again, just trying to avoid it getting stuck. As you can imagine, even with rinsing, because it's water related, they can get grimy or slimy. Maybe, hopefully not if you're rinsing it well, but inevitably, integrated sampler ball valves like to get stuck quite a bit. If you have a Van Doren, whenever you're rinsing out the Van Doren, you want to keep the ball, like the balls at the end of the Van Doren, slightly propped open until air dries. But once that happens, you want to remove whatever is propping open those balls, so that way that the rubber connector between the two doesn't continuously sit in an expanded position, which can cause it to be loose and not seal properly next time you use it, or at least over time if it's stored like that with it propped open. So for phosphorus sample preparation, the supplies here is what on the table is what you'll need. You'll need the 2-liter water collection bottle, a phosphorus sample bottle and label, a vial of sulfuric acid, gloves and goggles, an acid added sticker, and the lab slip. Important reminders for whenever you're doing the sample preparation: before you pour your sample into the smaller bottle, I recommend shaking up the 2-liter collection bottle a little bit, just rehomogenizing the integrated sample. Not that it should stratify or separate too much by the time you get back to your place to do this, but it's just good practice. Remember not to touch the caps or the lids of pretty much any of the sample bottles you have, including the phosphorus sample bottle here. Even when you're pouring it from the water collection bottle into the phosphorus sample bottle, avoid touching the lips of the bottle to one another. You're going to fill up the phosphorus sample bottle to the neck, leaving just a little bit of air at the top. And you're going to then open your acid vial and dump it into the sample bottle, the phosphorus sample bottle, cap tightly, and invert it a couple times to mix the acid into the sample. You'll also place the acid sticker on the lab slip. So whenever you get your acid from the coordinator or the state lab, it should come with a acid information sticker, which tells things like lot numbers or expiration dates and things like that that can be used for quality control purposes. If there's a weird reading, it could be a result of acid that isn't quite what it needs to be, or just like a bad batch of it. So it's a way to track down what batch that was and whatnot. And then once the acid is in there, you can store in the fridge until shipping. And I think in the video it says a week, and there was a question in the chat earlier about having collected a water sample already and planning to ship it off today. You can wait a week. I don't like to recommend 2, but the holding time, I guess, is what it's called for total phosphorus samples is 28 days, meaning the state lab has up to 28 days after the water sample was collected to analyze the sample for an accurate reading. I wouldn't recommend holding on to it for 3 weeks and getting it shipped down to Madison and them analyzing it within that final week. But you do have some leeway, especially with the changes in shipping protocol. If there's not a UPS drop-off location nearby as like a US post office, you can wait a little bit till the next time you go into town and drop it off then. The chlorophyll sample preparation, what you'll need is a lake water sample, the graduated cylinder, distilled water, vacuum filtration setup, which includes the rubber stopper here, the magnetic cup filter, 1,000 milliliter flask and hand pump, tweezers, filter, and a chlorophyll sample tube. Whenever you do this, this is where the Secchi depth reading comes into play. You're going to filter the amount of water based on how deep the Secchi depth reading was. I always forget, like off the top of my head, what the depths are and what volumes they imply that you should filter, but that will pop up here in a second. It's also in your chemistry manuals as well. So a couple helpful things is whenever you're placing the filter onto the vacuum filtration system, you're going to have the magnetic cup off, so you have that black filter screen, I guess it could be called. And sometimes it's very staticky and it won't stick exactly where you're wanting to put it. So using distilled water, just a drop or 2, really helps settle it in place, and that won't impact your reading, because distilled water hopefully would not have phosphorus or chlorophyll in it. Whenever you do that, if you tear the filter while you're placing it, or if it moves, wrinkles, you'll want to discard that filter and add a new one. It's important that the filter is intact and covering the entirety of the screen for the filtering process. Otherwise, you'll have just you'll be letting water through the filter, through the filtration setup without actually filtering out the chlorophyll, which can cause a decrease in your reading, which is a negative bias. But if it tears whenever you're removing it, as long as not too much of the water from on top of the filter or the material on top of the filter goes anywhere, you can still use the torn filter if it's torn after the filtering process has occurred. as long as all the filter paper gets into the chlorophyll tube. Like I mentioned, the filter volume is dependent on the Secchi depth. So once you have the filter placed and magnetic cup back on to your filtration setup, you're going to pour out from the water collection bottle a specific volume. And these are those volumes. So if you have a Secchi up between 1 and 1.5 feet, it would be 100 milliliters. If it's greater than 1.5 feet, it's 200. Not too many lakes up here, at least, have less than 1 foot. So oftentimes it is that 200 milliliter mark that you're aiming to filter for. Whenever you are filtering, again, before you pour it into the graduated cylinder, you'd want to shake up the water collection bottle to homogenize the sample again, pour it into the graduated cylinder. If you don't get exactly 200, that's okay. Sometimes you'll pour it in there and it'll be 204. If you need to dump some back out, don't dump it back into the water collection bottle. There should be enough volume in that to get a couple of these if needed. But if you are getting low on water and not sure if you're going to have enough to collect a sample, record the actual amount you filtered. So say you try pouring for 200 milliliters and you get 205. That's okay. Just on the lab slip, you'll write 205 rather than this 200 number. And once you pour in the sample into the magnetic cup, you'll start pumping it through. Sometimes it can take a second to get going. And if you have a low Secchi depth reading or a lot of material in the water, the filter can get gunked up sometimes. So starting out with about half of the needed volume, getting that vacuum going, and then pouring in the rest is kind of how I would recommend it. And once you get the vacuum going, you don't need to continuously pump forever. Like sometimes it'll keep sucking the water through the filtration system, even if you're not pumping. You'll just want to make sure that if you get to the bottom and there's a thin layer of water on top of the filter, give it a couple more pumps to make sure that gets through. And then whenever the lake sample is completely through the filtration or the filtration setup, you'll take the distilled water, rinse out your graduated cylinder. Again, rotating it can help kind of conserve some of the water and make sure that the entirety of the inside of that cylinder is actually getting rinsed. Take that, pour it into the magnetic cup filter, and the distilled water, you'd also rinse out the inside of the magnetic cup filter. And like it's mentioned here, don't include the additional volume from the distilled water to the recorded value on your lab slip. Only actual filtered lake water should be what's recorded on the lab slip. So say you have 205 milliliters of lake water, and then you use 25 milliliters of distilled water to rinse everything. Your recorded value would still be 205 and not 230. So I might have jumped the gun a little bit with the rinsing here, but this is a photo of what the rinsing would look like for the magnetic cup filter. And then once everything's rinsed, you're ready to remove the filter. I would first start by removing the magnetic cup. And then if you're having a hard time either getting your tweezers underneath the filter, or you notice like you're pulling up on the filter and it's starting to tear just because that vacuum is still pretty effective even with just the filter on top because of the material on it. Something I recommend is actually disconnecting the plastic tubing or the rubber tubing once the magnetic cup filter is off, and that will release the vacuum and make folding easier. It can be a little tricky, but like I mentioned, if it tears at this point in the process, once everything's been filtered, that's okay, as long as all of the filter material gets into the chlorophyll tube. And then once that happens, you'll label the tube and place in the freezer until shipping. Similarly, this has a long holding time. I'm pretty sure it's 28 days as well. So you can let it sit in your freezer for a while before shipping if needed. I wouldn't, like I said, recommend letting it sit there for 2 or 3 weeks. But a week, 10 days kind of at the most is doable. So this is what the lab slip looks like. It comes pre-highlighted for certain areas you should focus on filling out. So the date and time of your sample collection, name, contact information. And the state lab, if they receive the sample and see something that they have questions about, they will reach out to you and ask questions. I've had it happen to me before. You're also going to record the depth of the sample. You're going to write the amount of lake water in the bottom left corner where it says chlorophyll filtered. And that's where you put the volume of the lake water that was put through the magnetic cup. You're going to write the depth of your sample. So if you have an integrated sampler, the depth is 0 to 6 feet. And if you have a Van Doren, it's 3 feet. And then a sulfuric acid sticker in the bottom right. Something else to keep in mind real quick too is one of the things that is not highlighted in blue but should still be filled out is the sample description / device description. You'll just want to write in, if your sampling station's at the dipole, you can write dipole / integrated sampler or Van Doren. Any questions about that? It was a lot to cover. Like I mentioned, it's hard to kind of explain virtually, but were there any questions that came up?
There have been lots of questions in the chat,
I'm pretty
lots of
sure.
awesome questions. I think I've gotten through all of them. I've been
Okay.
busy typing here as you've been talking, but I think we got them all. If anybody didn't have their question answered, you could unmute or you could post it again in the chat to make sure that we see it.
Justin, this is Don Osterberger from Snipe Lake. I was one of the 10% that did the additional quality assurance test last year. I didn't get any feedback on that. If that would have indicated some issue with the way I was taking or processing the samples, would I have gotten that feedback, or how would I get that feedback?
Paul, I can't remember if we looked over last year's results, but typically we'll meet together as a team to go over the QA/QC results. And if there's any outlier lakes, for a duplicate sample, if there's or a blank sample specifically where there should be no phosphorus, but you're getting a high level of phosphorus, that would indicate that the integrated sampler itself is contaminated. I can't remember if we did that for this last year, honestly, but if there was an outlier, your regional coordinator would have reached out and either replace that equipment or just discuss, I guess, kind of how you go about your sampling protocol in case you're one of those that use your finger to release the ball valve on the integrated sampler or something like that. Am I missing anything, Paul?
Nope, I agree. You'll generally hear from the regional coordinator in your area if there's an issue, and then, like Chasten said, try to figure out where that issue may have come from, if it's dirty equipment that needs to be cleaned or replaced or something like that, or possibly something that in the procedure that may have caused a contamination. But you'll hear that directly from your regional coordinator.
Great, thank you.
So if you haven't heard anything, hopefully that means everything's all good. So
I have two questions if I could ask them.
Yeah.
The first question is, when I take temperature readings, I do measure the surface temperature and I call it 0.
Yes.
Is that going to be okay, or is that?
Yeah, I do that as well. I know some people don't. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. As long as the entirety of the temperature probe is beneath the water surface, I like to record that data, and recording it as 0 is definitely possible.
Okay, the second question is, I generally collect all my data and I keep all my data sheets, but then I usually only enter it once at the end of the season because it just seems easier just to do it once when I'm trying to get into swims. I don't have to fight it, 3 times a season. I just fight it once.
Yeah.
Is that going to be okay for you guys?
Yeah, that's fine. Typically, coordinators will try sending out communications just reminding volunteers to get their data into swims at the end of the year. But yeah, it can wait till the end of the year for sure. I like to recommend trying to get it in as early as possible. Data sheets can go missing or something could happen. But, if that's how you've been doing it, and heck, I don't even do that for LTT lakes that we do for the DNR. Usually that's entered during the fall and winter time when it's slower. So
Okay.
yeah, you can definitely do that. If you're still waiting to enter data from last year,
Mhm.
I would definitely recommend getting on that. But no, there's not I guess a time crunch for you getting your data in right away.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I would just hammer home that when you're entering your data, make sure you're setting the date that you collected the sample um, into the fieldwork event.
Yes. Thanks, Paul.
It,
Any other questions? Okay,
Reed Bedeau
so
here.
yeah.
Hi, Chaston.
Hey.
One thing you kind of jumped over, and I'm not sure whether everybody understands, but with the filter, after it's filtered and it's broken, you put all of the stuff into the tube. My understanding is that when they do the analysis, they dissolve the filter, so the integrity of the filter really doesn't matter. Just having the whole filter in the sample tube for the lab is what really matters.
Yeah, so a little bit to add to that. The filter structure still matters during the actual filtering process. If there's a tear, then that means you're letting water through the filter without actually getting filtered. So that's where if the tear happens before you're done with dumping the lake water through, that's where you would replace the filter and start over. But if you're removing the filter and it tears, you're completely right. I've done chlorophyll analysis myself, and yeah, you literally just put a bunch of alcohol into the chlorophyll tube, let it sit for a little bit, and then you grind it up anyways. So that's why if it happens after the filtering process, if it's torn, it doesn't matter as long as all the filter pieces get in. But if it's before or during the filtering process, that's where getting a new one's crucial.
Paul, are you going to be sending out materials soon?
The spring sampling materials will come from the regional coordinators, and I'm guessing most of those will be in the mail this week or early next week. The delay, I'm not sure if you were here at the beginning when I talked a little bit about the shipping labels that were created, but there was a delay in creating those prepaid shipping labels, and that also delayed the distribution of spring sampling supplies. So if you don't have them yet, they will be showing up very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to just keep going. I have a couple more slides about QA/QC real quick. So Paul mentioned a lot of this already, so I won't go into detail. But the one thing I really do want to highlight is if you're one of the 10% randomly selected, it's not an indication that you're collecting samples wrong. Like we need to investigate or anything like that. It's quality control, quality assurance requires the duplicate or blank samples to be random to just see, like I mentioned, whether your equipment might be dirty or also to compare to your normal samples, just to see how reliable our protocols are in general. And this sample is only collected once a year. Usually it's in July. So if you are QA/QC lake, your coordinator should be reaching out to you to let you know, and then they'll schedule time to either drop off your equipment or have you come pick it up, usually in about the May timeframe, to get that equipment. If you want it earlier, I think we have most of it, but that's typically how it's been done. The extra supplies for QA/QC sampling, Paul mentioned the cubitainers switching from 1 gallon size to 3 smaller 1 liter cubitainers. You're going to get an extra water collection bottle, filters, lab bottles, chlorophyll tubes, a filter, and some extra lab forms and labels. So for QA/QC sampling, you want to prepare the blank phosphorus before going out to grab the other samples. Again, the idea for the blank phosphorus is more so testing the equipment than anything else. Deionized water should not have any phosphorus in it. So the reading should be 0. And that's why you don't want to introduce phosphorus to the system by collecting your lake samples first. As this video or screenshot shows, having 2 people is helpful. even with the 1 quart cubitainers, like having two people would still be helpful. It just makes doing it on your own more manageable. Um, you'll want to thoroughly rinse out the collection bottle and integrated samplers with DI water. Again, kind of rotating the integrated sampler as it's being poured into the top. That way you can cover the entire inside. And you'll want to be extra careful about contaminants. Be mindful, just because you have gloves on doesn't mean your hands can't get dirty. If you have your gloves on and you're touching a whole bunch of different surfaces, chances are you're introducing phosphorus to the system. And similarly, you don't want to lay your integrated sampler onto a dirty surface that can introduce it another way. Duplicates are collected at the same time and place as your normal sample. It is exactly how it sounds. You're just going to be collecting a sample twice. Something to keep in mind is for the duplicate samples, you'll want to put that sample into the extra water collection bottle that's provided to you for QA/QC. And then you're going to want to rinse everything again with DI after processing the normal samples as normal. And the lab slips for QA/QC, the green here is duplicate and the blue is blank. BL like is how I help remind myself of what it is. If you can't remember which is which, it does say on the lab slips itself, if QC sample, select which one, duplicate versus blank. But otherwise, the lab slip should look pretty much exactly the same, and you should fill out the same information before shipping it. I didn't jump into shipping protocols. As you can see, that was a lot to cover in itself. I highly recommend checking out the videos on the YouTube playlist if you need a refresher. I probably will after this call. But that's all I have.
Any other questions for Chasten before we move on to ice and aquatic invasive species monitoring?
Oh, goodness. A lot of questions in the chat.
Okay, so when we're monitoring ice cover, this is reporting ice on dates and ice off dates. The ice on is when the lake is completely covered in ice, and ice off is when it is completely free of ice. There was a question in the chat that, not sure if I answered that one actually. It was asking about multiple ice cover dates. Sometimes we do see more than one ice off date. It might be clear of ice for a few days in February or March. We get a warm spell, it melts the ice, and then it freezes again. We would ask that you enter both of those ice on and ice off dates. So maybe your ice on was on December 2nd, and then you had ice off on February 20th, and then it froze again on February 23rd. You would enter another ice on February 23rd, and then when the lake melts again, you would enter another ice off date. That is becoming increasingly common where we see more than one ice off date in the wintertime. And again, we would ask you just enter both of those ice cover events. So this is an important thing to monitor because it affects a lot of lake processes, anything from algae blooms to aquatic vegetation growth throughout the season to fish spawning activity. A lot of things are impacted by water temperature and light penetration and things like that and relating to ice cover. So it's something that's fairly easy to collect. A lot of volunteers do this right from their porch or from the window. You're basically just looking out over the lake, and you also indicate what area of the lake can you see, just to sort of explain if there's a discrepancy in an ice off date, then we can see, oh, this person was monitoring from the south end of the lake, and there's part of the lake that they can't see, or something like that. It helps us understand if there's a limitation to what part of the lake that you can see. But it is just an ice on and ice off date across the season, and then we track that over time. So what we'll see, what we provide is an ice graph, and we can see, in this case, you can see data from 1980 through 2013 on here. This is showing that there is a decrease of about 1.5 days per year in the amount of ice cover on this lake. If you see years missing from this graph, it's because there's either only an ice on observation entered or only an ice off observation. And in order to calculate the total days of ice cover for a season, we need both of those dates. But it is really nice to visualize how the ice cover is changing over time in these graphs. These are automatically created. We can send them to you, or you can get them through the Lake Organization search feature on our Extension Lakes website. Paul Zadroik was planning on maybe showing that for a few minutes at the end of the meeting today if we have time. Otherwise, if you're interested in this, you can email me or Paul Zadroik, and we can get you this graph and show you how to find it on your own. Now, if you're doing AIS monitoring, aquatic invasive species monitoring, we provide a kit that you see on the screen here, basically a sampling rake on a rope and some materials in a clipboard. And we're helping you to sample and detect aquatic invasive species early. We know that when you find an aquatic invasive species early, it has done minimal ecological damage. The cost of management is much lower. The effectiveness of that monitoring is much higher. And so you ideally want to find those invasive species as early as you can. The training for AIS monitoring is provided by local AIS coordinators. That is usually a county land and water person, but it may be a nonprofit conservation organization that has AIS coordinators in your area as well. We provide the equipment to them, and then they come out and train you in person on those lakes, on your lake. So the way that this works is that you sample either from shore or from a boat. There's two different procedures that you follow. Many people just sample at their boat landing or off of their own shore. But if you were to do a boat landing, for example, you'd want to identify the boundaries of the public access. We're not asking anybody to trespass here. So you would go from one side to the other, and you would sample 5 equally spaced locations within those boundaries, within the public access area, and toss the rake at each one of those 5 sites. And to give you an idea of what that would look like, here's a couple of different public locations. We've got one with a beach and one and a boat landing, and then one with just a landing. So you would have roughly 5 equally spaced points. Sample with the rake twice off of each one of those points. If you have any piers or docks, then you would make that a sampling point, because we do know that aquatic invasive species often show up where there's a lot of boat activity. So right along those piers or docks is a good spot to find them if they're just introduced into the system. So at each one of those locations, you would scan the area for 30 seconds first, just visually look for any aquatic invasive species, anything that looks suspicious. Then you would toss your rake over there and try to collect anything and examine the material that is attached to the rake. So that could be mostly aquatic vegetation, most likely, but you'll also find snails and zebra mussels and things on rakes too. I've even caught crayfish on plant sampling rakes before when they're caught up in the aquatic vegetation. And on that last slide, I showed the Aquatic Invasive Species Early Detector Handbook. That is basically the training manual for AIS monitoring that we provide. We provide one of these kits per lake, and that handbook is sort of a field identification guide, but also has our monitoring protocols in there as well. So if you're sampling from a boat, it's very similar. You're going to first look at a map and identify high-risk sites. Those are most likely going to be boat landings or other access points. It could be inlets and outlets as well that sometimes concentrate aquatic invasive species. And the difference between this and the shore sampling is that you're going to meander your way around the lake and look for aquatic invasive species as you go, and then sample each site when you get to the sites. And then this is very similar, scanning first, then tossing the rake, then examining the material that is on the rake. The data sheet is pretty simple. It basically gets to how you monitored, where you were doing that monitoring, and what you found. And that's basically the extent of what this sheet collects. And then this information will be put into the SWIMS database, just like you do with water clarity data, temperature data, that sort of thing. I do want to mention a lot of people do aquatic invasive species monitoring, but they don't enter the data because they didn't find anything. And it's very important that if you did monitor for aquatic invasive species, you enter even if you didn't find anything. And that lets us know that somebody was out there looking. And finding no invasive species is a great result. We want to hear that. We want to know that somebody was out there looking and they did not find anything. So if you do any of this aquatic invasive species monitoring, please do let us know, even if you don't find anything. All right, and then the last thing I wanted to mention was the aquatic plant identification trainings that we hold each summer. These are open to CLMN volunteers. So if you're interested in learning more about aquatic plant identification or ecology, we have two different locations that we hold these workshops at each year. One is in the south, one is in the north. So June 9th and 10th will be the workshop at the Kettle Moraine Lapland Peak unit that's near Delafield. And we have not decided yet if that will be the same workshop repeated twice, 1 day each, or if there will be if it'll be like a 1.5 day workshop. But the ones in the northern part of the state at Kemp Natural Resources Station, that's June 23, 24, 25. That is 1 day repeated 3 times. It's the exact same training that happens 3 times. So you pick which day you want, and it's the same thing no matter which day that you choose. All of these workshops are free, so you can just come bring your own lunch and your own beverage and attend for the day. There's no cost to attend. The northern workshops do have a field component as well, so if you don't have to, but you can join us out for a couple hours on Lake Tomahawk, and we will actually practice field identification of aquatic plants on the water in small boats. So participants bring either a kayak or canoe or a paddleboard, something like that. We do have a couple of canoes on site and a couple of motorboats that we have access to as well. So you shouldn't be limited as far as having a boat or anything like that. But it is a great opportunity to learn more about aquatic plants and get some experience on the water identifying these things as well from various experts. So if you're interested in that, you can email me to let me know for sure if you want, but registration will go out open on May 1st, and I will announce that to the whole CLMN list. So everybody will get that announcement. Generally, they fill up within about 3 weeks to maybe 4 weeks. So if when you get that announcement on May 1st, you'll want to register sometime in May to make sure that you secure a spot. So that's it for me. I'm going to turn it back over to Paul Z, and maybe you can demonstrate the Lake Org pages real quick for just a few minutes, and then we can take any final questions.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I'll take over here. So yeah, I was just going to showcase real quick. We have a kind of a new website that we're still building and expanding on, but one of the things that it supports really well is our lake organizations. And in order to get to this new site, you would start on just the Extension Lakes homepage. We shared that at the beginning of this training. What you do after you go there, you're going to go to Lake Organizations tab, drop down, and you go to Lake Organization Search. Once you get to there, you're going to kind of see a relatively new page, and this is where you'd look for all your any of the lake orgs in Wisconsin. I have been using the Clean Lake Alliance is a lake org that that's really of course not there. I spelled that wrong.
Clean Lakes, Paul. I think
Clean
that's
Lakes. Thank you. Yeah,
yeah,
you're right. Clean Lakes Alliance. So this one has multiple lakes assigned to the organization. You can see there's 4 lakes in there. And if you go to full details, kind of just pulls up who's involved in the lake organization. It has the associated lakes and just kind of a slew of other information. One of the most particular tool sets that we have on here is that I have linked into the CLMN reports, ice on-off report data, clean boats, clean waters data, and DNR links as well. So it's kind of a nice little hub. And just to reiterate, this is only if your lake is contained within a lake organization or district in Wisconsin. So for the clean lakes, they have 4 lakes associated with it. And right now it's just checking data availability. It's actually going out to the SWIMS database and checking to see if it has a CLMN report that it can pump out for this particular lake, an ice on-off report, if it has clean boats, clean waters, stations on there. Every single one of these should have a DNR link as well. That'll take you to the DNR lakes page. And also, if you're interested, like how many lake organizations have a Lake Kigansa associated with it, and you can check all the lake orgs that might have that as well. But the one that I think most people will be interested here is either the CLMN reports, which is essentially what the WEX report does as well. It's just kind of nestled here. So you could produce the PDF or an HTML that would produce that report as well. So if you click that, it'll populate, or at least it should. Otherwise, the other one that a lot of people would be interested in is the ice on-off reports, and Lake Kigonsa has a really great one associated with it as well. So it's just going to load that. So it's spinning up and loading that one as well. And it's pulling this from several different web servers as well. So it does take a little bit of time as it's loading. Oops, I accidentally clicked off of it. There we go. Oh. I'm going to try this one more time. I think I had too much running in the background there. I think I made it angry. Oh. Try this one more time. So this would give us the ICE report, and we can use either HTML or the PDF. We'll probably just go with the PDF right now. They both essentially do the same thing, but I found a lot more people want to use the PDF at this point. The HTML is a great resource to have if you are part of a group or you have your own website. You can technically just take that HTML report and put it into your website. That might be for little folks who are a little more savvy tech wise, but it is definitely something that you can do. This does take a couple minutes to do, especially with tons and tons of data. And I think this is being driven from the DNR servers, and I don't think it's very happy right now. Yeah, it seems to have quite a bit of going on it. I swear all this was working yesterday, Paul. I swear.
The ice data graph that I showed a few minutes ago was
here it is,
taken from one of these as well.
Yeah. So this is the ice graph for Lake Kigonsa. With that large amount of data that has on there, it does take a long time for it to load. But this does give just a brief synopsis of, not a brief, but it does give a full summary of all the ice on-off reports, along with interpretations and the information about ice monitoring, the key terms, and things like that. We do give the recognition that it's from SWIMS. We are pulling this is coming directly from the SWIMS database. And yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that if there's a ton of data in there, like this starts back in 1903, there's 121 observations. It does take a little longer for that summary report like this to get populated. I'm This is a issue that I saw already, but basically I need the start date for the year needs to go to the start date of the ice on off monitoring. Right now it's doing the actual calendar year. I just got to swap it around. So this graph will be changed in the next week or so once I push the update out. But this is the ice on off report generator. At this point, this can only be found if your lake is a part of a lake organization. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that this is a tool that we've been currently developing, and we're hoping to have more and more aspects of this out there for all of us to use. Are there any questions? I know we're over time right now, so I won't be able to go into too much of this. I cannot see the chat right now.
I think we're all caught up on the chat questions at this
Okay,
point.
that's good.
But we are over 12 o'clock, so we recognize that we asked you to stay till 12. If there are any further questions, I think we can stick on the call for a little while and continue answering questions. Otherwise, if you're got a lunch appointment or something, you can drop off. You can feel free to email or call any of us with questions as well. We appreciate you all being here.
Yeah.
All right, I think we'll let you all go then. I appreciate all the comments in the chat. Thank you for that feedback. And we'll let you go. Have a great monitoring season. Let us know if you need anything from us.